Chicago, Illinois, 2019. If you've ever driven through Chicago at night, not the tourist Chicago, not the magnificent mile with its restaurants and bright windows, but the real city, the one that lives a few blocks west of all that, you know how different it looks after the sun goes down. The houses here are older, the streets are quieter, and the streetlights flicker a little more often than they should. This is where Ethan Cross grew up. Not in a wealthy neighborhood, not in the neighborhood his father pretended to represent. He was 22 years old. Dark hair, a perpetually tired look, almost always a coffee in his hand. Second year at DePaul Law School. Not because he had money, he had no money. Because he had a scholarship, and he had a reason. He needed to understand the law, not to obey it, to know exactly how it was being broken in ways no one ever noticed. He lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the west side with his younger sister Eleanor. Everyone called her Ellie, 19 years old, smart, with a sharp tongue and that particular stubbornness that drives you insane and makes you proud at the same time. 4 years ago, Ellie was in a car accident. After that, a wheelchair. The same accident took their mother's life. Her name was Sarah Cross. Until her death, she was one of the most respected independent journalists in the state of Illinois. Ethan almost never talked about his mother, not with Ellie, not with anyone, but he thought about her every day. Their father, Richard Cross, was not part of their lives, not in any real sense. He sent money, a check, first of every month, the same amount, no notes, no phone calls, no visits. Richard Cross held the position of Deputy Chief of Staff to the Mayor of Chicago, a man with a corner office, a firm handshake, and a reputation as someone who gets things done. He appeared at charity galas, spoke about city investment, about the future, about the people, the kind of man everyone respects in the room and no one truly trusts. Ethan hadn't spoken to him in 3 years. The night it all started was like any other. 11:45 at night, the desk covered in textbooks, laptop open, an empty coffee mug, a knock on the door. Ethan looked up. Ellie was already asleep. She had an early class. No messages on his phone. He went to the door. Standing in the hallway was a man he hadn't seen in years. In his hands, a yellow envelope, bags under his eyes, the look of someone who hasn't slept properly in a very long time. Frank? Hey, kid. Frank Morris. 61 years old, looked 70. 20 years at the Chicago Tribune until they pushed him out quietly without a scandal. Too many stories about too many inconvenient people. After that, freelance. Then less freelance. Then nothing. He was Sarah Cross's oldest friend in journalism, her mentor. Ethan let him in. They sat at the kitchen table. Small, 2 chairs. Frank placed the envelope in front of Ethan and never took off his coat. How did you find me? You're in the university directory. You're not hiding. What is this? Your mother left me something for safekeeping. Before she died, she asked me to keep it safe and decide for myself when. Frank, it's been 4 years. I know. He slid the envelope across the table. I was scared. I want you to know that. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I was scared. Ethan stared at the envelope, didn't touch it. What's inside? Everything she had, the full investigation, almost 2 years of work, shell companies, city contracts, money that was supposed to go to infrastructure funneled into private accounts through a network of subcontractors that don't exist. That's corruption. Every city in America does that. Not like this. Frank tapped his finger on the envelope. She traced it all, to the very end, to the names. And one of the names, don't, is your father. Silence. The hum of the refrigerator. A siren, outside. That's not news to me. I know, but what's in here is news. There's internal correspondence. Ethan, the accident, the police report said black ice. There was no black ice that night. I checked. I went back and checked. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother was 3 days away from publishing, and someone knew. Frank stood up and headed for the door. Frank, why didn't you publish it yourself? Frank stopped, his back to him. I have a daughter. She's 12 years old. The door closed. Ethan was alone at the kitchen table, the envelope in front of him. He didn't open it, just sat there, for a very long time. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He opened the envelope at midnight and didn't look up until 5 in the morning when the first gray light started bleeding through the kitchen window. What his mother had spent 2 years compiling wasn't thrilling, it was precise, not cinematic, just methodical, flawless, journalistic work. At the center of it all, a project called the Lake Michigan Shoreline Development Initiative, a 2015 city program officially aimed at revitalizing 3 underserved Chicago neighborhoods. Affordable housing, schools, transportation, infrastructure. Budget, $240 million in state funds. According to Sarah Cross's documents, over 4 years, roughly $60 million of that sum had been systematically siphoned off. Not stolen crudely, nothing that obvious. The money moved through a chain of subcontracting agreements, construction firms, engineering consultants, material suppliers. Most of these companies were real. They did some work, just not $60 million worth. The difference settled into small accounts, holding companies registered in Delaware and Wyoming, and ultimately into the personal accounts of 4 men. The first, a developer named Gerald Holt. The second, deputy director of the city planning department, Marcus Webb. The third, a partner at the law firm servicing the city contracts. And the fourth, the man who, according to Sarah's notes, was the architect of the entire scheme, Richard Cross, deputy chief of staff to the mayor of Chicago, Ethan's father. Ethan flipped through the pages, surrounded by documents and his mother's handwritten notes. One page held him longer than the rest, a photocopy of internal email correspondence. He reread it 3 times. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was a handwritten note on a piece of paper clipped to the last page of the folder. In Sarah's handwriting, it said, "Called R today. Told him I was close to the finish line. He didn't deny it. He asked if I'd thought about the kids. I said the kids would be fine. He said, I know what will be. Maybe I'm paranoid, but I didn't like the way he said it." The note was dated 11 days before the accident. Ethan placed the piece of paper on the table very carefully, leaned back, stared at the ceiling. He didn't cry. He'd finished crying a long time ago. At 6 in the morning, he made fresh coffee and started thinking clearly. There were 3 options. First, go to the FBI. He understood the process, he had the legal foundation, but 2 of the men in his mother's files had connections in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And his father's connections ran deep in all directions. Without protection, without a public trail, evidence has a way of disappearing. Witnesses of changing their testimony. Second, a newspaper. But the Tribune had already quietly forced Frank out for exactly this kind of story. Major outlets were cautious. They needed months for verification. And the moment the right person heard the story was coming, the paper trail would start evaporating. Or, make the paper trail public before anyone could destroy it. For the next 3 weeks, Ethan Cross did something most people would consider inefficient. He read everything he could find on document verification, digital security, on how to publish information in a way that couldn't be easily traced and easily silenced. He studied how whistleblowers had done it in the past, what worked, what got people imprisoned or killed. He was careful, extremely careful. Multiple layers of VPNs, a new digital identity, a cheap laptop bought for cash never connected to his home network, public libraries and coffee shops on rotation. And then he created a Telegram channel. He simply called it The Record. No face, no name, no geolocation. The description read, "Documents that belong to the public returned to the public. Nothing more." The first post went up on a Thursday evening, in March. 3 pages from his mother's files, carefully redacted, with a clear explanation what exactly it showed and why it mattered. By Friday morning, 400 subscribers. By Sunday, 9,000. By the following Friday, over 40,000. Ethan checked the numbers on the secondary laptop. His expression barely changed, closed the lid, went to law school, came home, opened it again. The response was bigger than he expected. There were plenty of people in Chicago who had been waiting for something like this. Residents of the neighborhoods that were supposed to get new housing. Contractors who'd been outmaneuvered by phantom companies. City employees who had noticed discrepancies and had nowhere to report them. They started writing to the channel, sending additional information. A woman from the planning department sent 3 internal budget memos she'd been holding onto for years. She'd always meant to do something with them and never found the right moment. A former site foreman sent photos of a building that was listed as completed and which, even from the photo, obviously wasn't. A paralegal from the law firm mentioned in Sarah's files sent a one-page list of client account codes. On its own, nothing. Cross-referenced with what Ethan already had another thread in the rope. Ethan was methodical about the releases. Not all at once, that's an amateur's mistake. Dump everything and let chaos swallow the meaning. No, one piece at a time. Each one carefully contextualized, each one building on the previous. Give people time to understand, to share, to demand answers. By the time the third release came out with the Delaware Shell Company registrations, where the managing partner turned out to be Gerald Holt's son-in-law, the Chicago Tribune ran its first story on the record. Cautious, with caveats. But they ran it. That same day, the mayor's press office called the channel irresponsible and unverified speculation. Richard Cross publicly said nothing. But that evening, Ethan's phone showed a missed call from an unknown number. On the voicemail, his father's voice. "Ethan, it's your father. I don't know if you're involved in this. I have no reason to think so. I just want you to know, things are more complicated than they look from the outside. I have things to say to you. Call me." Ethan listened twice, deleted it, went back to work. Connor Reed had been Ethan's best friend since they were 14. They met in high school. Ethan, on partial scholarship. Connor, from a family with money, he was so ashamed of it, was almost endearing. Different people. Connor was straightforward. The type who believes systems work if you work inside them. After college, Connor went federal law enforcement. 2 years in, he was with the Chicago field office of the FBI, cybercrime, with a secondary specialty in so-called information operations. They still met for lunch once a month, an old habit. Diner, midday, 2 of them in a booth. Burgers, coffee. You look like you haven't slept in 2 weeks. Exams. Ethan, it's March. Exams are 3 months away. Moot court competition. It's its own thing. What's new with you? Connor shifted slightly. We got a new case. Interesting one, actually. Yeah? You heard about that Telegram channel, The Record? A half-second pause. Ethan took a sip of coffee. Saw mentions on Twitter, I think. Something about corruption? Yeah, it's become a thing. City Hall's in a panic. Our division got pulled in questions about how the documents were obtained. Potential theft of government property, computer fraud, depending on the sources. We're running down the administrator. Any leads? Not yet. Whoever's doing this knows what they're doing. Routed through multiple proxies. Documents are scrubbed of all metadata. Clean. A slight pause. Honestly, between us, the documents look real. This has the feel of the truth. But my job isn't to determine that. My job is to find the person behind the channel. And you know what? I will find him. He said it without threat. Just a statement of fact, like a good hunter saying he'll track the animal down. What happens to him when you do? Depends on how the documents were obtained. If everything was voluntary, it's more of a First Amendment question. If anything was hacked or stolen, that's criminal. Connor looked at Ethan. You following this? Just interested in the legal aspect. For school? Right, a pause. But seriously, how are you? Really? Fine. You just seem not here. Lately. I told you. Moot court. Connor nodded, not entirely convinced. Didn't push. But after Ethan left, Connor sat alone for another minute, staring at his friend's untouched coffee. Something in his expression shifted. That cold, professional focus appeared the one Ethan never saw in their personal meetings. Connor already knew. With about 90% certainty, he just hadn't decided to act. Yet. Ethan kept Ellie completely in the dark. That had always been part of the plan. She didn't know about the folder, didn't know about Frank Morris's visit, didn't know about the record. He honestly believed he could keep it that way until the very end. He underestimated his sister. Evening. Ethan comes home and finds Ellie at the kitchen table. In front of her, a printed screenshot of a post from The Record. She looks at him as he walks in. Her face is calm, which is exactly how you know she's furious. Sit down, Ellie. Sit. Down. He sat. I've been following this channel since about the second week. Thought it was interesting. Then last week, one of the releases had a document, a 2016 budget amendment. She slid the printout toward him. I recognized the formatting. I'd seen it before, because Mom used to bring work home, and I used to see her papers on the kitchen table when I was a kid. A pause. How long? About 2 months. And you didn't tell me. I was trying to protect you. I'm not a child, Ethan. I know. But if something goes wrong, if someone comes asking questions, I needed you to be able to honestly say you didn't know anything. Mom's files. Frank Morris gave them to you? Yes. The accident, we can't know for sure. But you think so. Silence. Yes. Ellie sat perfectly still for a long time. Then she let out a slow breath. Okay. Okay? I'm not okay. I'm very far from okay. But I'm not going to yell at you. Because if those files had come to me first, I would have done the exact same thing. She looked at him. You need to be more careful. You don't even understand what kind of people are behind this. If you think our father is the scariest thing in this story, you're wrong. I'm careful. Does Connor suspect? Ethan didn't answer right away. Ethan, I don't think so. I don't know. You need to figure out where this is headed. You can't just keep going forever. At some point, it has to end somewhere. Where's the end? I'm still working on that. Work faster. Gerald Holt was not a public figure. He didn't give interviews. He didn't attend the charity galas where deals were made. Photos of him online could be counted on one hand, and all of them were taken at official events, to which he came for exactly 15 minutes and exited through a side door. But in the Chicago construction business, people spoke his name very quietly. Very quietly. Holt started as a foreman in the 90s. By 2010, he owned 3 construction companies and a holding company that officially owned nothing. He wasn't the type to give direct orders. He was the type to create conditions where there was simply no other choice. He was sitting in his office, large desk, a window overlooking the lake, not a single personal item except a photo of his wife when he was briefed about the channel, The Record, and whose files, exactly, were being published. The man across from him, his own head of security, former FBI, laid a printout on the desk. It's Sarah Cross. Her archive. Someone got access. Holt stared at the papers for a long moment. Then, calmly, he said, Sarah Cross is dead. Who's running the channel? Not confirmed yet, but there's an assumption. The son. Holt paused. Ethan Cross. Law student. That's him. Holt stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the lake. Slowly, without turning around, he said, I don't need his address. I need him to stop feeling invisible. Meaning what? Meaning find the sister. Just find out where she goes, who she's with, what time. Don't do anything. Just gather the information. I want the boy to know we can walk up to her at any moment, and no one will protect him. And if he doesn't scare? Holt turned. His face was completely calm. Everyone scares. Some just take longer. There's a problem with working alone sooner or later. You start thinking you're smarter than you are. Ethan was genuinely careful, but about 3 months in, he made his first serious mistake. He'd been corresponding with a man named Daniel Marsh, former project manager at one of the subcontracting firms tied to the Shoreline Initiative. He'd been quietly fired 18 months earlier. He had documents, real, physical documents, and he was willing to hand them over. The problem was how to do it without leaving a trace. Ethan arranged a handoff. Coffee shop in Oak Park, cash, arrive, and leave at different times. Baseball cap. No phone. What he didn't account for 3 days before the meet, people came to Daniel's house, working for Gerald Holt. Daniel panicked and told them about the meet. Coffee shop. Ethan at a corner table. Daniel sits down across from him, nervous, eyes not looking where they should. Ethan knew something was wrong within 30 seconds. Daniel was sweating. His gaze kept sliding to the door. Who did you tell? What? No one. Daniel, look at me. Who did you tell? Daniel's face broke. I'm sorry. They came to the house. They had photos of my kids at school. I didn't know what to do. Ethan was already standing, threw a 10 on the table, walked to the restroom, exited through the back door, down the alley. A block away, a black SUV pulled up to the coffee shop. Ethan didn't run. Running draws attention. He walked, turned a corner, another one, found a busy street and melted into the crowd. He took 3 different buses home, 2 hours later. Daniel Marsh was arrested 2 weeks later, charged theft of corporate property. Ethan told him taking those documents was legal, that nothing would happen to him. He was wrong. Daniel spent 11 days in county detention. Then, a lawyer got him bail. The charges were eventually partially dropped. But in those 11 days, he lost his apartment. His wife took the kids to her mother's in Milwaukee. Ethan wired money anonymously through a complex chain. It didn't fix anything. He sat at his desk, not working, just sitting, staring at a single point on the wall. This was what he hadn't been ready for. Not the legal risk to himself, the damage to other people. He told himself, keeping people at a distance means protecting them, not involving them, being the only one who carries the full picture. But his decisions affected people whether he involved them or not, and he couldn't always protect them. And sometimes his choices, what to do and when, put people in a line of fire he had assessed as acceptable. He thought about Daniel Marsh's children, thought about whether he had the right to use the word acceptable about someone else's pain. For a long time after that, he slept badly, but he didn't stop. It was that same evening he came home and noticed something that shouldn't have been there. The apartment door was slightly open. Ethan pushed the door. Slowly, inside quiet. No sign of forced entry, nothing disturbed, everything in its place. But he knew for a fact he had locked both deadbolts when he left. He checked Ellie's room, empty. She was in class. Her wheelchair was where it always was. He went back to the kitchen and stopped cold. On the table was a photograph. Ellie, taken clearly yesterday, same jacket she wore that morning. She's rolling out of the building entrance in her chair. The shot was taken from across the street. Sharp. Professional. No note, no threat. Just the photograph. Ethan stood there, staring at it. The blood drained from his face. His heart was beating somewhere in his throat. He understood what it meant. This was not a warning that they might come for him. This was a warning that they could come for Ellie, and they already knew where she was and what she looked like. And when she left the apartment, they didn't even need to say anything. The fact that the photograph was on his table said everything. For the first time in the entire process, Ethan felt real, animal fear. He hid the photograph, told Ellie nothing when she came home, just smiled the usual smile and asked her how her day was. Inside, everything had coiled into a tight, cold knot. That night, he didn't sleep at all. He seriously thought about stopping. In the morning, he released the next issue. Because if he stopped now, everything they had already done, everything his mother had done was for nothing. And Holt's people wouldn't disappear. They would just learn that the method works. From that point on, Ethan started carrying a knife, not to attack anyone, just to feel some semblance of control. It didn't help much. Among the sources writing to The Record, there was one woman. She called herself simply Kay, worked in the planning department. Sent internal documents precise, well-attributed, valuable. Ethan trusted her, included her among the 3 or 4 sources he allowed to ask questions about his methodology. He didn't know that Kay had been intentionally placed. Her real name was Carla Weiss, former analyst. After being terminated from city employment, she fell into debt. A year ago, she was approached by a man claiming to be a lawyer for one of Gerald Holt's holding companies and offered very good money for a simple task: make contact with the administrator of The Record and, carefully, unhurriedly, learn as much as possible about their methods and identity. Carla was not a villain. She needed the money, and she told herself that everything she was sending were genuine documents, that she wasn't hurting anyone. But over 3 weeks, she passed her handler enough information to narrow the search considerably. Ethan started realizing something was wrong, not from analysis, but from a feeling. K.S. Questions became slightly more specific. Her interest in technical details slightly more persistent, imperceptibly. But something was off. He ran a test. He fed K a false detail that the next release would come not on Thursday, but Wednesday, and that it would contain a document related to a specific date in 2014. 26 hours later, the press office of one of Holt's holding companies released a preemptive statement denying any connection to events in 2014 related to city contracts. There had been no release yet. Ethan closed the encrypted chat, sat down, stared at the wall for a long time. Then he wrote, K, a short message. Thank you for your work. The channel is shutting down. Goodbye. And never contacted her again. After that, He rebuilt the entire source communication system from scratch. But the realization was bitter. The people hunting him were not stupider. They were just playing a longer game, and they had more resources. Ethan felt something he hadn't felt before, that he might lose. Not just go to prison, but lose everything. And somewhere deep inside, he understood. To win, he might have to become a little like them. That thought scared him most of all. His father called 3 more times. Ethan didn't answer. Then, one evening, he walked out of his building and saw Richard Cross standing next to a black car directly across from his apartment. Richard stepped out of the car as Ethan approached. Well-dressed, silver at the temples, the kind of man who looks like authority automatically. By default, he raised a hand, not threatening, almost careful. "I'm not here to threaten you. I want you to understand that first." "Then get in your car and leave, Richard." 5 minutes. "I don't have 5 minutes. I know it's you. I want you to know. I figured it out 10 days ago, and I told no one." Ethan stopped, slowly turned around. "What do you want?" "To talk. As a father. You never functioned as a father. Don't start now. What you're doing, they will hurt you. Not me. But there are people in this story who think differently than I do, who don't have my limitations." Is that a warning or a threat? It's a fact. Gerald Holt is not a man who waits for legal process to complete. I've known him for 12 years. I've seen what he does to problems. You are not a problem he will solve through the courts. You are a problem he will solve another way. You need to understand that. Noted. Good night. Ethan. Ethan stopped. "Your mother. I want you to know, I did not give the order for what happened to her. I want you to believe that. What happened to Sarah was not something I wanted. A long silence, wind, distant traffic. But you knew it could happen. Richard Cross says nothing. You knew she was close. You knew Holt was nervous, and you didn't protect her. I thought he'd back down. You thought it would be convenient if this resolved itself, and your hands stayed clean. Don't come here again." Ethan walked into the building. But it was that same night he learned something else. Not from his father afterwards, when he reread his mother's documents with new understanding. Sarah hadn't just known about the scheme, she had known something that changed the entire picture. In her notes buried in the middle of the 3rd folder, written in small script, as if she wasn't entirely sure she was reading it correctly, was one paragraph. R may not be what he seems. There is a possibility he is not a partner. He is a hostage. Holt has been holding something over him since 2013. I need to verify this. If it's true, things are more complicated. She never got the chance to verify. Ethan sat with that piece of paper for a long time. His father possibly was not just a co-conspirator, possibly a man being blackmailed, who couldn't get out, who knew and couldn't stop it and didn't protect her. That didn't make him innocent, but it changed the nature of it. Ethan put the paper back in the folder. In the morning, he released the 11th issue. By the 12th week, things began to unravel. Not the investigation that, if anything, was accelerating. 3 journalists were now independently verifying the documents from The Record. A reporter from the Chicago Sun-Times published 2 major stories based on the channel's releases. A state oversight committee formally requested documents from City Hall. What was unraveling was Ethan's protection. Connor Reed was closing in. Ethan felt it, in small ways. Connor stopped mentioning the case in casual conversation, started asking different questions about stress, about his schedule, about whether anything unusual was happening. That's how you talk to someone you're beginning to suspect, and are almost certain of the same diner, lunch, but the silence between them was a different kind now. You know what's strange about this case? Huh? Whoever's running this channel, they're not impulsive. Every release is timed. Every document is framed exactly to hit a specific news cycle. This isn't just a leak. This is someone who understands how information moves, and they're using people consciously, like resources, like a journalist, maybe, or someone who studied it. Connor looked at Ethan levelly, someone patient, and someone willing to go all the way, even if innocent people get hurt. A pause. Sounds like you're narrowing it down. We're narrowing it down. We have several points of convergence now, and I'll be honest with you, when we pick him up and we will pick him up. I'm not sure I'll like him, even if he's right. Connor stared at Ethan, almost unblinking. Would you? Would you like him? A man who plays with other people's lives for what he thinks is the truth. Ethan held his gaze. I don't know. Maybe the truth isn't about being liked. Connor laughed, not happily. You know what your problem is, Ethan? You've always thought you could calculate everything in advance, but people aren't equations. And one day, you're going to miscalculate. And on that day, I won't be able to help you. He stood up, threw a bill on the table. I wish I was wrong. I really do. And he walked away, without looking back. Ethan watched him go. For the first time, he saw in his friend's eyes, not doubt, but icy, professional resolve. Connor didn't just suspect. He almost knew. And if it came to it, he would do his job. 3 days after that lunch, 2 of Ethan's most reliable sources went silent simultaneously. One wrote on an encrypted app, I think I'm being watched. I can't continue. The second never responded at all. And then, on a Tuesday morning, Ethan opened the news and read, Telegram had received a request from the U.S. Attorney's Office to block the channel, The Record. The channel was still up. Legal process takes time, but the clock was clearly ticking. Ethan stood in the kitchen, reading the news on his phone. Ellie rolled out from the hallway. I saw, yeah, how long do you think we have? Weeks. Maybe less. What now? Ethan set the phone down, looked at Ellie. I need to make a call. And also, Ellie, if something happens to me, stay out of it. Promise me. I won't promise that. Ellie. The Cross family doesn't abandon their own. Did you forget? Mom didn't abandon it. You didn't. I won't. So finish this. Fast. Her name was Maya Reeves, 38 years old, senior investigative correspondent for a major national outlet. Over the last decade, one of the most respected names in American investigative journalism. Ethan had studied her work for years, read 3 profiles of her, noted specifically that she had published stories that angered very powerful people and withstood the legal pressure every single time. He reached her through 3 layers of anonymity, asked for a conversation. She agreed within 6 hours. Video call. Ethan on the secondary laptop. Camera blacked out just a sliver of light. Maya Reeves on the other screen, collected, attentive, a notepad in front of her. You have my attention. You had it from the 3rd release. Honestly. Talk to me. I have everything. The full archive. Everything the channel has published, plus a significant volume of material that hasn't gone out yet. Enough for a full investigation, with named sources, verifiable documents, a clear chain of evidence. How was the material obtained? Legally. Everything in the archive was provided voluntarily by sources or obtained from public records requests that were simply never connected publicly. Nothing hacked, nothing stolen. I'll need to verify that independently. I know. I'm prepared to fully cooperate with verification. What do you want in return? A pause. I need you to publish everything simultaneously, when you're ready, not in pieces, all at once. Including the material on the story where this all started, on what happened to a journalist named Sarah Cross in 2015. Sarah Cross was your mother. A pause. Yes. Then Richard Cross is, yes. Okay, what else? When you go to print, I will give you my name, publicly. I'll tell everything who I am, what I did, why. Full transparency. You understand what that means legally. I have an unfinished law degree. I understand what it means. You'll likely face charges. Computer fraud if someone wants to push. Conspiracy. It will get ugly. I know. Then why? Ethan thought about it for a moment. Genuinely. Because if I stay anonymous, the story will be about the channel. About the documents. People will argue about whether the source can be trusted. But the moment I give my name, when I say, I am Richard Cross's son, here's what he did, here's what happened to my mother, it stops being a debate about documents. It becomes something people have to look at directly. A pause. And because. If I disappear completely now, if I let myself remain just a voice on the internet, I become exactly like them. A man without a face, without accountability, without consequences. I can't do that. Maya Reeves looked at him for a long time. Give me 3 weeks to verify, then we'll talk timelines. In those 3 weeks, Ethan Cross lived very quietly and very carefully, attended classes, came home, made dinner for Ellie, didn't check the record more than once a day. He thought about his mother. He remembered how she worked, the table covered in papers, how she used to explain things to him when he was young, not simplifying, but really explaining. This is how the money moves. This is why it matters. There are people in those houses that were supposed to be built. Those people are real. He was 12. He understood maybe 40%. Now all of it. He picked up his phone, dialed. Hey, where are you? Home, just. Wanted to hear your voice. A pause. Ethan. What? Are you okay? I think so. I think I will be. A pause. Whatever happens, I opened an account. There's enough for 3 years' rent and your tuition. You remember where the information is? I remember. Good. Ethan, I need you to know something. What? Whatever happens, I'm not angry at you. Not for any of this. What you did, what Mom tried to do, it mattered. It always mattered. A long silence. Go to sleep. You too. Maya Reeves's story went live on a Wednesday morning in November. 14,000 words, fully documented, with names, with the money traced, with the story of the Shoreline Initiative, Gerald Holt, Marcus Webb, Richard Cross, and with the story of Sarah Cross, what she had found, and what was done to her. In the final section, the name of the person behind the record. Ethan Cross, 22 years old, second-year law student, son of Sarah Cross. Ethan sat at the kitchen table. The article open on the laptop. His phone had already started buzzing notifications, messages. He set it to silent. Read the article to the end. Simultaneously, the record published its final message. This channel was created for one purpose: to put the truth where it couldn't be removed. That is done. Thank you to everyone who shared, helped, and refused to look away. I hope it mattered. E. The post was shared 40,000 times within an hour. Connor Reed read the article at his desk in the Chicago FBI field office at 7:45 a.m. He read it twice. Then he leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. He knew. He had known from the very beginning, and he had stayed quiet not because he wasn't sure, but because he was waiting for the moment when he could act in a way that would both do his job and not destroy his friend entirely. He stood up, put on his coat, and walked to his supervisor's office. He did his job, of course, but he requested recusal from the active investigation. It was granted, reluctantly, but granted. The aftermath unfolded at 2 speeds simultaneously. Fast and slow. Fast. Gerald Holt was arrested by federal agents 11 days after the story broke. Marcus Webb resigned that same day and subsequently agreed to cooperate with investigators. The city inspector general launched a formal audit of the Shoreline Initiative. 3 other officials were suspended from their positions. Slow. Richard Cross was not arrested immediately. He had lawyers, connections, and, as it turned out, a carefully constructed status as a potential cooperating witness, which gave him a certain legal cushion. It was hard to watch. He was charged, 7 months later, on 4 counts. Ethan was not present for that in person by then. He had his own legal problems. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed charges against Ethan Cross in January. 2 counts related to computer fraud. 1 count related to conspiracy to obstruct a federal proceeding. His lawyer, initially a public defender, then a civil liberties organization, took the case. Pro bono argued the charges were retaliatory, that the documents were legally obtained, and that the conspiracy count had no factual basis. The legal process took nearly 2 years. In the end, 1 charge was dropped. A second was reduced to a misdemeanor. On the third, the one with the most legal ambiguity, Ethan took a deal. A fine and 18 months of supervised release. No prison. Close. But no prison. Ethan stood on the steps of the federal courthouse. Not celebrating, just standing, looking out at the street. He had withdrawn from the university during the process, then reapplied. He was accepted. He hadn't decided yet whether to go back. Connor Reed met him on those same steps after the plea hearing. They stood several feet apart. It was cold. Hey. A long silence. I could have put you away. I had enough to open a case on you 3 months before the story even dropped. I know. Why didn't you? Ethan asked. You could have. It's your job. Connor stared at him for a long time. Because, unlike you, I hadn't forgotten how to doubt. I didn't want to believe my best friend could coldly hang someone out to dry the way you did, Daniel. I didn't want to believe you were willing to sacrifice people, but you were. And that's a part of you I'm always going to see now. The part that makes you dangerous. Ethan didn't look away. You're right, I was willing. I told myself the ends justified the means, and I may have crossed a line I didn't even know was there. But if I hadn't done it, Holt would still be free. And my mother would still be a statistic in a police report about black ice. I don't know what's right, but I know doing nothing is also a choice. And you pay for that too. Connor was silent. Then he nodded slowly. Are we still friends? Ethan asked. Connor looked at him for a long time. I don't know. Maybe. In time. But I won't forget how you sat across from me at that diner and lied. And I won't forget that you used people, including me. Because I was part of your calculation, wasn't I? You knew I was FBI, and you kept going. You knew it would hit me, and you didn't care. Ethan lowered his eyes. I did care. It's just. I decided the stakes were worth it. I was wrong about a lot of things, but not about the main one. He extended his hand. Connor looked at it, then shook it. If you ever do anything like this again, I will put you away myself. No hesitation. Understood. They stood there for a second, two people who'd known each other for years, now understanding their friendship would never be the same. Then they walked down the steps, in different directions. For now, here's what didn't happen. Chicago didn't become a perfectly functioning, corruption-free city because of what Ethan Cross did. The systems that allowed the Shoreline Initiative fraud to run for years were not dismantled overnight. Some of the redirected money was never fully recovered. Some of the people involved faced no consequences at all. Some of the neighborhoods that were supposed to receive $240 million are still waiting. That's how it actually works. It's not neat, it's not finished. You pull one thread, the sweater unravels partway, and then someone in another corner starts knitting again, just a little differently. But here's what did happen. 3 neighborhoods at the center of the Shoreline Initiative were formally audited. Independent auditors came in. A new oversight structure was created. Actual construction inspected, verified, resumed on 2 of the 3 sites. Gerald Holt went to federal prison. 18 months. Marcus Webb's cooperation led to additional charges against 2 people who had never been named in any of the material before. A law was passed in the state quietly, without fanfare, named after Sarah Cross, mandating independent review of city subcontractors above a certain threshold. It wasn't enough, but it wasn't nothing. Richard Cross was convicted on 2 of the 4 counts, received a fine, probation, and a lifetime ban from public service. He moved to Florida. Once, he wrote Ethan a letter. Ethan never read it, but he kept it. He didn't know why. Ellie Cross earned her degree in public policy, went to work for a nonprofit focused on accountability in urban housing. She sometimes spoke about her mother, in interviews, in lecture halls, clearly, without breaking. She was better at it than her brother. Frank Morris published one more story about the Sarah Cross case, about what happened, about his own years of silence. It ran in a small outlet. Not many people read it, but he published it. Afterwards, he told Ethan it was the most honest thing he'd written in 30 years. Ethan said that meant something. Frank said he wasn't sure it was enough. Ethan said, "It's never enough. You do it anyway." And Ethan Cross. Here's what's important to understand about Ethan Cross before this story ends. He was not a hero, not in the pure sense. He made decisions that caused people pain. He decided certain costs were acceptable and was wrong about that more than once. He hid the truth from people who loved him. He used people. He manipulated situations. He looked at his father and calculated instead of feeling. At some point, he looked at himself and saw the same cold, calculating features he hated in his enemy. He had learned to justify other people's suffering with a higher purpose. And that, perhaps, was what helped him survive. But it was also what made him alone. He won because he was strategic and patient, and because he was right about the facts. But being right about the facts and being a good person are not the same thing. And Ethan Cross knew the difference. The thing I think about, the thing I think he thought about, alone in that apartment at night after the noise had died down, is this. His mother sat at that same kitchen table with those same papers and tried to do it the right way. Public records requests, journalistic process, transparency, her name on the story, and it got her killed. And her son sat down at that same table and decided to be more careful, more anonymous, more strategic, willing to accept costs. And he survived. And the question with no clean answer is, which way was right? What does it mean to do the right thing the wrong way? What do you owe the people you drag into it? What do you owe yourself? He didn't have answers. I don't either. I just know that in a city where many people decided it's better not to look up, he looked. And some things changed, and some things didn't. That's what it looks like in reality, when one person decides to fight. Not victory, not defeat. A crack in something that seemed monolithic. And sometimes, a crack is enough. Chicago, dawn. The city begins its day. Traffic, people, buildings. Somewhere inside it, a law school lecture hall fills with students. In the third row, a young man with tired eyes opens a criminal law textbook and begins to read.